Everybody, on behalf of my Deputy Convener, Councillor Kelly, members of the committee who are here and members who are on stream, plus officers who are here and officers who are on stream, may I extend a very warm welcome to this planning committee held in Gravesmouth Community Education Unit. In accordance with Section 43 of the Local Government in Scotland Act 2003, it has been directed that this meeting will be conducted in such a manner as to allow remote attendance by elected members. The meeting will also be live streamed. Before we go into this morning's agenda, I would just like to say a few words in relation to the fact that our Senior Planning Officer, Mr Ian Dryden, who's been with this council for 16 years, but actually has been in local government for 41 years, is taking retirement. This is a very sad day indeed for us, because I think everybody will tell you quite clearly that he's been a wonderful officer, easy to approach, and obviously a top professional in his field. There will be an opportunity later on at the end of the meeting for members to say something. But other than that, I'm sure that you would join me in wishing Mr Dryden all the best in his retirement, and to thank him wholeheartedly for the wonderful work he's done during his period with this council, which has lasted 16 years. Thank you for that. Thank you. I'll now go apologies.
Thank you, Convener. We have apologies submitted by Provost Bissett. Thank you.
That takes us to item 2 on your agenda, declaration of interest. And just for clarity, I'll read this out. Members should declare any financial and non-financial interest they have in any item of business to the meeting, identifying the relevant agenda item and the nature of the interest. Have we any declarations of interest at this time?
Convener.
Councillor Bowes.
Yeah, the item for 116 Main Street in Larbert. It is item 5. I live 4 doors from there. Although I don't know the person, I'm afraid the perception could be that, being such a close neighbour, that I could know. So therefore, I think it's right that I recuse myself from that item.
Thank you very much. Before we go on, and just an opportunity here to ask if there's anybody who would like to request a site visit. First of all, I would request a site visit for item 8, and just for clarity, I'll read that out. It's a construction of dwelling house at land to the southeast of 39 Laxdale Drive, Heatherview, for Mr B. Cuthell. I would just like to ask members if they would agree to an unaccompanied site visit. Agreed. Okay, thank you for that. Members online as well, thank you for that. Also, we have item 9, construction of 8 flatted dwellings and 1 dwelling house at land to the north of 34 Seaforth Road, Falkirk, for Ruby Developments Limited. Unfortunately, the Provost is on holiday today and won't be with us, but he has written in and asking that this be going to a site visit, unaccompanied, obviously. As members agreed to that?
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed to that. So just if you want to mark your papers, so that's item 8 and item 9, unaccompanied site visits. Thank you for that. That takes us to item 3, which is a minute of meeting of the Planning Committee held on the 17th of April 2024, pages 4 to 15 on your agenda. Have we any questions arising from that minute? None? Agreed. Fine, thank you. That takes us to item 4 on the agenda, first of the site visits that we had. Installation of ground-mounted solar array and construction of fence retrospective at 1 Princes Gate, Slamanan Road, Falkirk, for Professor Kurt Mills. It's pages 16 to 33. And just to say at this stage that we have deputation requests. An application has been made by Professor Kurt Mills, the applicant, to be received as a deputation to be heard in respect of this item of business. Are we agreed to hear Professor Kurt Mills?
Agreed.
Right. We also have an application by Mr Jamie McSween, an objector, to be received as a deputation to be heard in respect of this item of business. Are we agreed to Jamie McSween?
Agreed.
Agreed. We also have an application by Yvonne Young as an objector to be received as a deputation to be heard in respect of this item of business. Have we agreed to Yvonne Young coming forward? Agreed. Fine, thank you. We'll go now to our officer, which will be Julie Seidel-Gregory, to give us the report. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Convener. Can we please look at just the photographs for this one, if possible, whilst I'm speaking? This application relates to the installation of a ground-mounted solar array and a boundary fence at 1 Princess Gate in Falkirk. The application property forms part of the Category B listed former Lochgreen Hospital and is within a battlefield site. The application is retrospective as the fence and infrastructure for the solar array are already installed on site. The solar array comprises of 12 panels, ground-mounted on an angled frame. The development would be screened behind a 1.8 metre high fence, which is included in this planning application. Members visited the site on the 29th of April. The consultation responses are detailed at section 4 of your original report. Members should note that Historic Environment Scotland do not object to this application. The public representations are detailed at section 6 of the report. I will not go over these in detail as I note that we have a deputation request today. The application is assessed as being in accordance with the development plan and the full policy assessment is at section 7A of your original report. Members will note that MPF4 gives significant weight to the climate emergency and it is recognised to be a priority for all planning decisions, which does provide support for this particular development. In considering the impact on the listed building, it's acknowledged that this type of development is modern in appearance for practical reasons. However, it's considered that the setting of this listed building has been somewhat changed by the development of modern housing surrounding the building and in close proximity at McGee Place and McNabb Gardens, and also development within the garden ground of the application property, including an outbuilding. On this basis, it's considered that the proposed development is reasonable within the context of the wider character of the area as now established, including the residential use of the former hospital building. It's recommended that committee grant planning permission subject to the conditions detailed at section 9 of your report. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much for that, Julie. It's now an opportunity. Is Jamie McSween online? Jamie McSween?
Good morning, I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. Right, sir, you have a 10-minute period to put your summary over your objection, and then there'll be an opportunity for members to ask any questions of you, okay?
Okay, super. Thank you very much. And thank you for...
That's fine. You've got 10 minutes from now. Thank you, sir.
Super, thank you. And thank you for accepting the application to talk this morning. So I think in terms of the application, I've got no issues at all in terms of solar panels going up, but the area where I feel that the application shouldn't go ahead is that I just don't believe, looking at it, that it will not change the character of the building. The array itself is not small, so it's something like 25 square meters, and in addition to that, some recent outbuildings went up, which were also about 25 square meters in terms of the floor plan. So it will change the character of the listed building. I think that's clear, and I just don't accept the argument that that's gone forward that the character of the listed building has already been changed by the more modern houses around it. That's like saying that Edinburgh Castle, it would be okay to put a modern extension on that because there's modern flats around Edinburgh Castle. A listed building is a listed building. The character of that building surely has to remain as it is and shouldn't be changed because of things that are around it. And I think that is the main point really of this objection. Historic Scotland are quite clear that renewables and solar arrays and such should happen, but the effect of that should we should look to mitigate the effect on the listed building. And I think, and hopefully members have seen this being out to visit, there are other opportunities and other places that these panels could go that would have less impact on ultimately on the character of this building. And I appreciate that's taken less than 10 minutes, which I hope is okay. But that really is, in summary, what I believe is the objection in terms of this application.
Well, thank you very much for that, sir. There will now be an opportunity for members both here and online to ask any questions of you. So if you just stay where you are at the moment. So, is there anybody got any questions? Councillor Sinclair?
Just to clarify, would this be an opportunity to ask questions of officers at this point? Or just to the deputy?
No, it just in terms of the objection and the summary that came out.
Okay. Thank you. I do have one short question. Mr. McSween, thank you for your presentation there. Are you aware of any other areas where there are listed buildings that are subject to solar panels or solar arrays, either locally or across the country? I know you mentioned Edinburgh Castle.
Yeah, and actually I am aware that Edinburgh Castle, on top of the War Memorial there are solar panels that have gone in. And those solar panels, I don't think you would notice in the slightest. I think it's been a very sympathetic installation at that building, and therefore because of that you don't notice it. And I think we would hope that there would be a similar approach with this listed building in Falkirk.
Thank you, convener.
Thank you, councillor. Have we any other questions at this stage to Mr. McSween? Councillor Forrest. Thank you, sir.
Mr. McSween, you say that the array will cover 25 square metres approximately, but
yeah.
How much have you done your maths on how much will actually be seen? Because the majority of that would be hidden away behind that high fence.
It will, but half a metre off it above the fence will be visible. So, the fence is 1.8 metres high. The arrays is, will be about half a metre above that. I think in actual fact more like 70 centimetres. Unfortunately, my daughter did sit her higher maths earlier on this week, but my Pythagoras rules and everything else to figure out the exact percentages. She's doing biology today, so I can't ask her to help me with that. But it will definitely be visible from the road, and I think particularly in terms of our property and the neighbouring property, we'll both have this pretty significant thing sticking above the fence, which will be clearly visible. And you absolutely don't have, the right, I know, in planning to a view, but realistically, we're looking about between 50 and 70 centimetres above the fence. That's a significant, length as well. So it will be, noticeable.
Thank you for that, Mr. McSween, and I hope you get your calculator back. And I wish you well in both their exams.
Well, I'm not sure there'll be much use with it, even if I get it back, to be honest. But thank you nonetheless.
Yeah, thanks, councillor. Have we any other questions at this stage from Mr. McSween? No. Okay, sir, thank you very much for that, and we all wish your daughter well and everybody else that's sitting exams well. Thank you. This is an opportunity now for Yvonne Young, an objector, to be received as her deputation. Is Yvonne with us?
Yes, I am. Can you hear me okay?
We can hear you fine. Yvonne, you've got 10 minutes to do your summary, and then there'll be an opportunity for members if they wish to ask any questions. Okay, you've 10 minutes from now, Yvonne. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I just want to say that I completely concur with what Jamie has just said. I live directly behind the proposal, and these proposals, in theory, are about 3 or 4 feet from my boundary line, which is right next to my long-standing patio area. I have deep concerns regarding the size. It's almost industrial size, and I know Jamie's touched on that you're not entitled to a view, but from my back garden, I'm seeing an outsized building, a fence that was erected primarily without planning permission in the first instance. The solar panels went up without planning permission, and only as a result of the neighbour interventions did this neighbour result in seeking planning permission. My concern is what's next. Is it going to be a double garage? Is it going to be an extension? What else is going to be next to this listed building? It's almost out of proportion size that all the outbuilding, the fence, the size of the solar panels are all in one location when this neighbour has a huge garden area, and alternatives should and could be considered, in our opinion. The age and the significance of the property, built in 1881, and the history involved in the building, the Princess Gate. This neighbour knew that it was a listed building, is now trying to mitigate around planning regs to enforce or to try and push through proposals that are sought and thought after at the time. So that would be our main concern. And plus, you know, when the proposals are there, the hedges, the shrubs in my garden are all going to be affected. The ecosystem is not about just providing power to this building. It's about providing, sorry for the noise, it's about providing, you know, an overall aesthetic view, as well as the full aspect of what the implications are to this listed building. So that would be where myself and my husband are coming from as far as our objections to this proposal.
Okay, thank you very much
Thank
for
you.
that, Yvonne. Thank you. There's now an opportunity for members both here and online to ask any questions of Yvonne on her objection summary. Looking about here, anybody online would like to ask any questions, Yvonne? Anybody in the building here? Any questions? None? Okay, no questions for you, Yvonne. Thank you very much. This is now an opportunity. For Professor Kurt Mills, the applicant, to be received as a deputation in respect of this item of business. Is the professor with us?
I am Mrs. Sheila Mills. We had asked Jack Frawley if I could deputise for Professor Mills, my husband, because he's unable to attend. I would hope that that would be acceptable.
I'm quite happy with that. Has members agreed to that? Great, fine, thank you for that. Now you have 10 minutes and then an opportunity for members to ask any questions. So carry on, your 10 minutes starts now. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to speak today. As I say, unfortunately, my husband, who has taken the lead on this application, is unable to attend and extends his apologies to the committee. I'd also like to thank the committee for the site visit. Hopefully, when you visited, you saw that we have done everything we can to minimise the impact of the development on our listed building, on our neighbours and the surrounding area. Given the global climate emergency, I hope we can all agree that sustainable sources of energy like solar panels are a good thing. They will help future-proof the building, making it more resilient to climate change and allowing us to play our part in addressing the climate emergency. When we were first considering the addition of solar panels, we did consider the roof of the property, but were informed verbally by a member of the Council Planning Office that this would not be permitted due to the listed building status. We understood and accepted this as we recognise our responsibilities as custodians of a listed building. We then considered placing the solar panels on the roof of the outbuilding, but as that would have been clearly visible to neighbours and from the street, we looked for an alternative. We thought ground-mounted solar panels offered the best solution, minimising impact on the listed building as they would be covered by the fence and not visible by the road. We also thought being ground mounted, the development would have less impact on our neighbours. I would just like to mention here that we sought planning permission when we realised that the solar panels would go above the fence. Objections raised have been addressed by the Planning Office, and we have previously addressed them in our submissions to the Planning Office and the committee. As we understand it, Historic Environment Scotland was consulted about the proposed development and raised no objection. The Planning Office recommended to grant planning permission, as did the members of the Planning Committee, after a site visit on the 29th of April. We hope these recommendations will be upheld and the planning application will be approved by the committee today. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much for that. It's now an opportunity for members both here and online to ask any questions of the applicant. Any questions coming? Councillor Burris.
It's actually not so much a question. It's just, and I appreciate that Mrs. Mills may have picked up an error there, but the planning committee have not actually decided anything. She said that the planning committee have decided to approve something.
No, I said recommended. I said recommended.
But we still don't recommend a site visit.
Oh, sorry, my mistake. I read that in your papers.
Yeah, that's a good point, because you'll know yourself that when you come out to meet us, has to be quite clear that this is unaccompanied, and we don't enter into any dialogue with anybody on an unaccompanied site visit. Quite right.
My mistake. My apologies.
Thanks, Mrs. Mills. I wasn't having a go at you. I just wanted for clarity for anybody looking into this application.
Very good point indeed. Thank you. Any members here or online? Any questions to the applicant? None?
Convener.
Councillor Sinclair.
Yeah, just very briefly, Convener, thank you, and thank you, Mrs. Mills. You spoke about, or there's been talk about alternatives. Could you explain a bit more about what alternatives you considered other than the roof solution that you discussed? Thank you.
As I mentioned, we looked at the roof of the property, and then we looked at the roof of the outbuilding. Those were the two ones that we considered before we went to the proposal in front of you.
So no other alternatives than the roof of the outbuilding and the roof of the main building?
That's correct.
Right, thank you. Thanks, Convener.
Any other questions to the applicant at this stage? Any other questions? None? Okay, then that's an opportunity to go back to our officer, Julie Seidel-Gregory, who did the report. Just to say, Julie, you've heard the submissions from both objectors and applicant this morning. You've heard the questions coming from members. Have you anything to add to your report?
Nothing to add. I mean, I think there's some things we could clarify in terms of, I think the size of the solar array was questioned, and I think, forgive me, one of the members asked what the what area would be visible from the road. I think we clarified that the surface area of the solar array, I get it as being just over 24 square metres. I would say that these calculations are approximate. The area that would be visible from the public road, which would be above the fence, which is already in place, would be approximately 1.4 square metres. Obviously, that's a linear measurement. In terms of the comments from Mr. McSween about listed buildings, I would just comment that Edinburgh Castle is a scheduled monument, which is of national importance, and I understand that they do actually have solar panels, which I think was appreciated. What I would say is, protecting the character and the setting of listed buildings is extremely important, but it's not a barrier to development. It doesn't mean that you can't carry out development. In this case, an assessment has been made, it is our view that actually this is a lesser impact than a development which perhaps would be affecting the fabric of the building. In this case, what we're looking at is affecting potentially the setting of this listed building. It is our view that the setting of this listed building was somewhat altered when it changed from a historic hospital building to residential use. And with that, you get developments that any person would reasonably expect to function within that property, including an outbuilding and driveways and so forth, which you see there. And you also now have modern housing development roundabout. So the setting of this building has altered somewhat since it was built. The other thing to point out is the location to the side of the house, I feel, means that in the future, if the applicant was to move house, these structures could be taken away. And there's also a condition, which you'll see, condition number 2, which means that if these panels are no longer generating electricity and they're no longer required, that they should be removed from the site.
Thank you very much for that update. It's invaluable. Okay, members, we'll open it up for general debate now. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Julie, by any chance, do you have the street view? Sorry, that's a bit closer. Do you have the street view image? Because as I had parked outside and I was walking up and I looked at the building behind from the fence, and if you're saying it's 1.4 metres, I'm guessing it's only about 300-400 millimetres actually above the fence. If you can show us that street view.
Approximately 40 centimetres, so less than half a metre. Jim, are you able to show some of the photographs just now to members? Okay, so we'll just scroll through the photographs, and members will recall this from the site visit. That is a picture taken from within the site, so that is looking north, standing just next to the outbuilding towards the frame that will house the solar arrays if this application is approved. If we scroll down, okay, that's looking at the driveway just adjacent to the fence. If we keep scrolling, I'm hoping that we've got one that's from further back, and if we keep going, again, that's from within the garden looking backwards. And if we just pause on this photograph for a second, hopefully this helps you, councillor. This, as you come into the driveway and you're standing in front of the building line of the house, you can see there the fence line. You'll see that the fence is of a similar construction and height to the fence which is to the west there for the new housing which was mentioned. You can see the frame slightly poking through the slats in the fence there, and you can also see that modern outbuilding to the rear, which is timber clad to the front. Does that help?
It does, and it also shows that it's not an extension as well. It's actually separate from the building.
Thank you for that, Councillor Bowes. Bailey Kerr.
Thanks, convener. Just a couple of questions. With regards to noise, is there any noise that comes from these solar panels?
That's a really interesting question, councillor. I'm not aware of any noise issues with this type of development. We deal with lots of applications for this, both on an industrial and a domestic scale. We did receive a response from our Environmental Protection Unit, and they did not raise any concerns.
Okay, thank you. With regards to a statement that Mrs. Young made regarding the fence without plan permission, has the fence got plan permission now?
The fence, which is screening in that photograph there, the fence which would in effect screen the solar array, that does not benefit from planning permission at the moment, and it's included in this application. Under normal circumstances and within a property that was not a listed building or not in a conservation area, that fence may potentially have been classed as permitted development, which is perhaps where the breach may have originated. Because it is within the grounds of a listed building, it requires the benefit of planning permission. The applicant is seeking to regularise that fence as part of this application, along with the solar array as proposed.
Thank you, Julie. Thank you.
Okay, so Councillor Murtagh, and then Councillor Colley. Thank you.
Thanks, convener. I mean, my questions were on the fence, and obviously I have some understanding of this topic in general, and within my own ward areas like Dunmore and Letham, and how, you know, things which wouldn't require planning permission do suddenly require planning permission because of their conservation status and listed building. And I have felt in general on a theme that we need to do everything possible to try to balance the ability for development of, you know, importantly when you've got environmental improvements to, you know, to be possible. That said, every case is important on its merits, and I do have a lot of sympathy with what the objectors have brought forward on this. Looking at the fence, though, you know, I suppose one thing that occurs to me, and that given that it is seeking planning permission as part of this application, in terms of the design of the fence, I mean, you can see obviously that you can see part of the solar, the frame as it is at the moment through that. I mean, would there be anything in terms of enhancing the design of the fence? I'm thinking things like, you know, when you kind of double wall, you know, to prevent that kind of see-through effect that planning officers or, you know, could suggest about the actual fence itself that might enhance this situation, for particularly in light of some of the objections that would improve the kind of visual aspect. Is there anything at all that could be looked at or suggested in terms of that?
Really?
Again, a very interesting question. I think it was quite evident there, both on site and when we looked at those photographs, that you actually could see through the slats. At the moment, you're seeing that frame, and once the solar panels are fixed to that frame, if indeed this application was approved, then that might be a wee bit more visually prominent. I think members could consider a condition that requires the applicant to put proposals to us for increasing the visual screening of that fence, because there's various options. You've mentioned there, councillor, double slatting. There might also be an option to, for instance, plant a box hedge or something in front, which would soften up that boundary. So I think that would probably be my suggestion in dealing with that.
Thanks, Gillian, through your convener. I mean, I think, you know, I'm not saying, you know, completely in terms of my position at the moment, but I think that would be an interesting thing to explore if we got to that stage in terms of conditions, because it does seem to be, you know, one of the issues. And I think I'd question and take advice on what was appropriate, because I think, you know, given that you're going to have a solar array, it might not be easy to plant something like a hedge that or something which was organic that you then had difficulty in maintaining. So I think that would be something that need to be explored and have discussion on. But I think it would be interesting to explore that if we get to that stage. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your input. That's a very, very important question as far as I'm concerned. Councillor Colley, I believe you did hand up. No. Anybody else? Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. Excuse me. Thank you, convener. It was just a question, if I may. We know where the solar panels would be if this was granted. Where would be the location of the inverter? You know, I'm guessing obviously in the listed building, but whereabouts has that been agreed or discussed?
Julie?
I think that might be a good question to direct to the applicant. As far as I'm aware, the infrastructure required for these panels is already installed, so any cabling and the frames, the frame is in place. I'm not aware of any additional supporting infrastructure that would be external to the building, but I'm sure that Mrs Mills can answer that question if members are minded.
Okay, Mrs Mills.
Absolutely, thank you. The inverter and the battery are in the storage area of the outbuilding.
Right. Okay. No, thank you, convener. That helps. Thank you. Thanks,
okay.
Mr. Mills.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Any other questions? Looking round. Any other questions in line? No. Okay, then, members, you've heard from both the applicant, the objectors, and we've heard a lot of valuable information coming from our officer. So how are members feeling? I'm going to go around the table here regarding this application. To be honest with you, I'll come in right away and say that obviously we're at the site visit. I think that was a very important question that was brought up by Councillor Murtagh regarding the look of that fence, and I'd be quite happy to move to grant, subject to what our officer had said about in terms of condition, to try and make it more what we could say user friendly. So I'm happy to move.
Convener.
Yep.
I'm happy to second, but I think the wording is a closed boarded fence.
Closed boarded fence.
Which means then there won't be anything visible through it.
Fine. So how do members feel? We've got a motion moved and seconded. Councillor Kelly.
Agreed with the motion.
Okay.
Can I?
Councillor Sinclair. Yep.
Can I just clarify because unfortunately I was unable to get to the site visit, so and I haven't been able to get up since, so I'm relying on kind of Google Street View to have a look, and I can see the fence. Would that condition also require the fence at the side, so bordering the other properties to that side of the application site? Would that closed border fence be continued all the way round within that condition?
We'll bring Councillor Burrows in his expertise.
To let you know, closed boarded fence, all they're doing is adding a slat on the inside to close off the actual visual through it. So it's not actually, you're not taking that fence down and building a new fence. All you're doing is adding a slat on the inside. Yeah, you do. I don't know what's on this side of the house for the modern houses.
Right. So we'll bring Julie. Will come back in that. That's quite a pertinent question in relation to the frontage, but we're talking about the side elevations.
I think that this application includes that fence we'll call it the fence to the front, the one that would screen the solar panels. So I think a condition to seek some amendment to that fence, to me, would meet the test for a planning condition. Not knowing the ownership arrangements of that fencing to the side, and obviously you've got other interested parties, I think I'd feel less comfortable about that. Right. Obviously it would be open to adjoining residents if they're not enlisted properties, if they wanted to add slats to their fences, that could be done potentially without requiring a planning application. So there is scope there. Whereas that fence to the front, as we're calling it, really, requires permission, and it should be covered in this consent if there's any changes to that.
Come in, Councillor Murtagh.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with yourself and with others on this. But what I would say is, I think the closed boarded fence, to me and to others, it seems a logical way of doing it, but just that if we were putting the condition, and I'm sure Mr. Henderson will be able to suggest, is just that in a way that it doesn't make that the closed border fence is the only option, so it's like that was worded that it's, such as closed border fence or other appropriate measures that will enhance the visual amenity or whatever, or enhance the privacy element, just so that if there are other things which might be more appropriate or could enhance it, that they are not just limited. So I'm just to say that in the wording that could kind of be looked at. That would be, I think, helpful in terms of my view.
Thank you. We'll bring Mr. Henderson in on that very point. Thank you, Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, Convener, and thank you, Councillor Murtagh. My note from what Julie Gregory said a moment earlier was that the condition would require the applicant put proposals to the Director of Place Services for agreement in relation to increasing the visual screening of the fence. So I think that would allow for options to be put forward. That may not end up the exact wording. Our planning colleagues would come up with the precise wording. I think it was a little more open than just requiring the double slatting.
I'm happy with that. Okay, Councillor Sinclair, I'd want back in, sir.
Yeah, just again briefly, just to clarify that the application site clearly has a boundary. What formulates the boundary of that application site? Does it stop short of the fence as I'm looking at it, to the right of the site, or is it the fence? And I know that there's discussion to be had over ownership and so on and so forth, and that's obviously an issue that's been discussed in other spheres, given the amount of fencing that's come down across the district with the storms and the difficulties with that. But I suppose for me, it's about clarifying where the boundary of the application site stops and whether that forms a part of it.
Do you want to come back in?
Yeah, I mean, we could look at the location plan if you wish. The curtilage of this property goes to the fence to the west, and there's quite a large area to the front. However, with boundary fences, as you'll know, it can sometimes fall to one of the neighbours that fence comes within their title deeds, and that then strays into sort of illegal land ownerships that come out with planning. My concern would be if we're directing that there's amendments to be made on the fence to the west, and that isn't actually within the applicant's control, albeit it defines their curtilage, then that condition could be unenforceable.
Okay, thank you for that. Thanks for that.
Okay, we'll just clarify where we are. Mr. Henderson, you've been taking notes there, and we'll put it to members once you've summarised.
Thank you, Convener. So we have a motion by your good self, seconded by Councillor Bowes, to grant planning permission in accordance with the officer recommendations, but subject to an additional condition requiring that the applicant submit proposals to increase the visual screening of the fence which is adjoining the array, and that be put to the Director of Place Services for agreement, and upon agreement there would be implementation of these screening proposals. Thank you, Convener.
As members happy with that? Have we agreed to that?
Agreed.
Agreed. Thank you very much for that. Thank you. Thank you. Yep. Okay, members, we're on to item 5. Widening of existing vehicular access, alteration to boundary wall and associated development at 116 Main Street, Larbert, for Mr. B. Baranowski. It's pages 34 to 49. You would just see that Councillor Bowes had already declared an interest and has left when this item has been discussed. The report again is by our officer, Julie Seidel-Gregory. Thank you, Julie.
Thank you, Convener. Please can we show the plans and photographs for this case, if possible? So this application relates to the widening of an existing vehicular access at 116 Main Street in Larbert. The application includes new hard standing, alterations to the existing wall and gate piers. Members visited the application site on the 29th of April. Consultation responses are detailed at section 4 of your original report. The public representations are detailed at section 6 of your original report. The application is assessed as being in accordance with the development plan, and the full policy assessment is at section 7A of your report. This application relates to the modification of an existing vehicular access. It's considered that there would not be an adverse impact on road safety or congestion because of the development. In practice, increasing safe and easy parking at the application site would reduce the likelihood of on-street or indiscriminate parking associated with this property in an area which is busy with parking restrictions. The proposed development also seeks to remove a section of boundary wall and relocate the wall pier, and it's considered that the resulting boundary finish would respect the townscape character of the area. It's recommended that Planning Committee grant planning permission subject to the conditions detailed at section 9 of your report. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much, Julie. Now open up to members. A number of members went on the site visit, and I think it was very beneficial indeed. So open up for members for discussion. Yes, sir. Councillor Forrest.
Thank you, Convener. I can only, after having been to the site visit, as a driver, I would have hated trying to negotiate a small turn into the what is currently the garden area, in that sort of traffic, rather than it be a problem for road safety. I would say it would be an enhancement. Personally, I note that many other houses in the street have already done this. Whether or not they have planning permission, they've already done it. And I would think that this is ultimately sensible thing to do, and I agree with the report.
Okay, so are you formally moving acceptance of the report, the recommendation contained within the report?
If no one has any other comments to make, then I'm more than happy to move that report.
Fine, I'm going to go to Councillor Murtagh.
Yeah, I'd be more than happy to second that. And
you're on mute, Councillor Murtagh, mute.
Can you hear me?
Yes, okay, fine now.
Okay, it must just be a delay. Yeah, I was saying I'm more than happy to second that, and I don't have an interest to declare, but I do have rather a lot of experience of parking outside a house not too far from that in particular, and I think that going into the driveway there, coming out and the traffic there, I think that anything that we can do to enhance the safety there would be preferable. So I can't see any particular reason to refuse it. I'm more than happy to second.
Okay, thank you for that. Could I say at this stage, I remember, I think it was 27 years ago, I had an article in the Falkirk Herald when I had put a proposal to Falkirk Council that we should do away with everybody's front gardens, because the problems we've got now with parking are absolutely horrendous. It didn't be doing very well with a lot of people, but the fact is that I think it's clear that there's so many people now making driveways out of their garden, and it's a lot safer for everybody in the community, and not just for the owners of the gardens. So, okay, we've got a motion moved and seconded to agree with the recommendations contained. Have we got somebody else got a light on? No.
Oh, sorry. No, my apologies.
So, just to clarify then, anybody else like to come in at this stage? Okay, we've got a motion moved and seconded to agree the recommendation contained. Has everybody agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. And we could bring Councillor Bowes back in now. Thank you, sir. Everybody's doing it. I can afford that. Yeah. Then we'll have a wee comfort break then. We're waiting on Councillor Bowes coming back. So we'll have 5-minute comfort break. Thank you. Okay, everybody, thank you very much. An opportunity now to reconvene the meeting. We're at item 6 on your agenda, which is a construction of dwelling house at land to the north of One Waterside Cottage, Whitecross, for Mr. Craig Dunn. It's pages 50 to 72 in your agenda, and once again, this was an unaccompanied site visit. The report is by our officer, Brent Vivian. Brent, carry on, sir.
Thank you, Convener. Members will recall that the committee considered this application on the 17th of April when it was agreed to continue consideration of the application to allow committee to carry out a site visit to view the physical characteristics of the site. The site visit took place on the 29th of April, and at the visit, members viewed the application site and surrounding area, including the relationship with neighbouring properties, the proposed access location and the road environment. As explained at the site visit, the site forms part of a small cluster of properties near and at the junction of the B825 and Station Road at the western edge of Linlithgow. The proposal is an infill development utilising garden ground between the existing house on the property and Bridge House to the north, and is for a 3-storey, 5-bedroom house built into the slope and with a triple garage at road level. Drawings, 3-dimensional images and photos were shown at the site visit, which can be shown again if required. The site lies within the countryside and the greenbelt. The proposal does not meet any of the criteria under National Planning Framework 4 to support new housing in the countryside or greenbelt. However, the infill nature of the development within the envelope of an existing building cluster and the minimal impact it would have on the greenbelt are material considerations to balance against the new National Planning Framework 4 policy. The main concerns raised in the report relate to road safety and parking, as were explained at the site visit and as informed by the consultation response from the Roads Development Unit. In addition, 5 public representations were received, comprising 4 objections and 1 representation, raising concerns as detailed in the report. It is considered that no new matters were raised at the site visit that would alter the previous recommendation, which is a balanced recommendation to refuse the application on road safety and parking grounds as detailed in the report. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you very much, Mr. Vivian. It's an opportunity now to open up to members. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, Convener. Brent, you offered to show the drawings because obviously not everybody was at the site meeting. Can you possibly show those drawings so that everybody in the committee can see them?
Yeah, certainly. So I'm not sure who's showing the drawings today, but if the person concerned could bring them up. Jim, is it? Jim Miller. So that's the site plan. It shows the footprint of the building within the property. This plan gives you the wider context, showing the row of houses along the west side of the B825. The application site is shown in red. The balance of the property containing the existing house is shown in blue, and the property to the north, Bridge House, is also shown on that drawing. Can we see the next one, please, Jim? I think we've seen that one already. Perhaps if you can bring up the drawing showing the elevations.
Apologies, they are loading. It's just taking a while to come up.
Sure. So that drawing shows the side elevations of the new build. As I said, it's it's over three levels, and you can maybe pick up from that from those drawings that there's significant excavation required to take out the slope on the site. There should also be elevation drawings showing the front as well.
Apologies, the file seems to be too big and cannot be shared.
Okay, Brent, just carry on with your submission, sir. Thank you.
I think that was it. I mean, there's some photos. What about the photos? Are they able to be shared?
Ah, that's better.
Okay, well that's
yeah,
that's looking down towards the site on the right hand side. That's a bit further away, that one, but it shows the bridge house on the top of the slope on the right hand side. There should be some other photos which actually show the site a bit closer. Yep, that's the photo taken from last August. Members will recall the site doesn't look like that at the moment. It's the heavily vegetated area that you can see there on the right hand side of the road is the site, but there's been significant work already carried out to remove that vegetation and to lessen the slope of the site. Now there should also be some yeah, that gives you a more up-to-date picture of what the site looks like. There should also be some three-dimensional images. I'm not sure whether you can share those because they actually give a good feel for what the development will look like.
If you bear with me while I reload Adobe.
Yeah, fine, thank you. Just when we're waiting, Brent, maybe ask you a question at this stage.
Yeah, sure.
You spoke, obviously, we're looking at you and classified as an infill. It has been mentioned, gap site. Just for members, you spoke about the balance in relation to NPF4. I wonder if you just maybe go over that part again that you spoke about.
Yeah, National Planning Framework 4 is it sets out a number of criteria to support greenbelt and housing within the greenbelt and in the countryside. So it's relatively restrictive, and this type of situation doesn't fit within the criteria under National Planning Framework 4. So in strict terms, there's no support under National Planning Framework for countryside and greenbelt policies for this development. But of course, you need to balance that against what the local development plan policies are, and also about actual impact of this development on the greenbelt and the countryside. As I said, it is an infill site. It is within the confines of an envelope of existing buildings. So the assessment is that it would have, very, very little impact in real terms on the character
Of the green belt.
of the green belt. Yep. Now, if you scroll down in this document, there should be some three-dimensional images which give a good feel for what it would look like. Yeah, keep going. I think we've seen those ones. Well, actually, that one there shows the front elevation, so that's the one you couldn't see before. So that shows what it would look like from the road with 3-bay garage, obviously facing onto the road. You know, with quite extensive excavation into the slope to achieve that development. So if you scroll down a bit further, Jim, there should be some further images. Right, so that starts to give you a feel for what it would look like. The building on the left there is a recent extension to the existing old stone-built house on the property, and the new build proposed is the one you see on the right of that image. So if you just obviously these are indicative of what it would look like, and if you just keep going down. So I think that's all the images that I had to share. Thank you, convener.
Well done, Jim.
Thank you very much. Councillor Kerr?
I don't know if Councillor Rouse had finished.
Stay with Kerr, sorry. I'm being reprimanded, sorry.
No. Just listening to, I didn't get the site visit. There is no site visit, but I managed to, with the kindness of Brent for that application and Julie for the two previous applications. And I think it's for me, it's important to see some of these sites. When Brent says it's greenfield, so I says, so what designates the greenfield? Me personally as garden ground. So, and Brent just says it's generalised greenfield. I says, right, okay. So the thing that I asked in site in Alaska as well, the 3 garages underneath with regards to parking, can you, whether, I don't know if it'd be you, Brent, or is it Craig Russell that's on, or Gary, regarding the garages?
Craig's here.
Craig, do they class as parking areas?
Thanks, convener, through you. No, they don't, councillor. The National Roads Development Guide, although it does mention accepting garages above a certain size, Falkirk Council has an exception to that. We don't allow garages to be counted as parking provision. Just to clarify, there are parking spaces in front of the garages. We're just concerned that there isn't enough depth from the public road to the front of the garage door for those to suitably accommodate 3 parked cars.
Okay. I don't know if this will be you as well, Craig. Has there been any accidents in that area?
It would be me, councillor. I don't have accident stats to hand for that section of carriageway. I can have a quick look at what I have available at the moment if you give me a few minutes, convener.
Yeah, I'll go back to Brent then, Craig, when you're doing that. It's already been stated by yourself, Brent, and slight comment by the convener about an infill site, and looking in the LDP, the National Planning Framework 4, PE 14 in the countryside, and point 2 development proposals in the countryside for uses not covered by the policies for specific uses will only be permitted where they constitute an infill site or they utilise an existing building. And as everybody can see, this is clearly an infill site with houses both sides. Another part of the policy, the local development plan 8C05, housing in the country. Proposals for housing development in the countryside will be supported in the following circumstances. Point 4 of that, appropriate infill development. And I take your points that you are raising, Brent, but I think that the policies as well as the countryside and housing the country, another policy that was mentioned is placemaking. Point 3, easy to move around and beyond. The development should be designed to encourage the use of active travel and sustainable integrated transport, which is stated in policy IR05 and IR07. Obviously, it's at the road end of the main road to Linlithgow and Falkirk. Also, in the National Planning Framework 4, Policy 15, and number A, development proposals will contribute to local living, including, where relevant, the 20-minute neighbourhoods. I think this development ticks that box with that as well. And on mentioning them, Convener, I'm quite happy to propose that we approve the application on the grounds that I've just mentioned as a material consideration, like Brent mentioned at the start. There is policies that it doesn't meet, but to outweigh the policies, I think the policies I've given you is a fair justice of approving the application.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Yep, thank you, Convener. I've a few different questions, actually, if I may ask of Brent, please, or Craig, actually. The first question is just, I didn't make the site visit, so my apologies for that, but my first question is the B825, how busy a road is that? Do we have an idea of the sort of traffic volume on that, approximately even, you know?
Convener, I can give an indication of that. The council produced a local transport strategy, and it contains a number of traffic counter readings in that document. Now, I have to warn you that the information I have here is from a count undertaken in 2012. So it's a good few years out of date, but that will give you a sort of comparison between the B825 and a busier road, for example. So at the time that this was reported, the B825 carried approximately 1,700 vehicles. So not one of the busiest roads in the district, Convener.
Is that a 1,700 per day or per week?
That's an average volume per day, yes.
Yeah, okay, thank you. My next question is related to, I can see the access for Bridge House coming off a different road, but with Waterside Cottage, is there any parking there? Do they have parking, or has it been noticed that the occupants, if they have cars, park on the road, the B825, beside Waterside Cottage? Hope that makes sense.
Convener, again, I'll answer that one. Street View indicates, Convener, that there is in Kirtledge parking for Waterside Cottage. It also indicates a vehicle parked outside Waterside Cottage, straddling the footway and the carriageway.
Right, okay. So that leads me on to my next question, which I think, Craig, you'll be able to answer, is looking at the photographs, it would seem to suggest that irrespective of whether the applicant has got 3 cars or not, but with 3 garages, there's quite an area of space in front of the garages. It appears like that to my mind, it's not just a simple driveway where you reverse in or reverse out, that there'd be an opportunity to, if you can understand what I'm saying, turn your vehicle, drive in and turn your vehicle if you wanted to, exit the site again, should it be granted. Does that make sense? So in other words, there's a bit of room to manoeuvre without actually encroaching on the road.
Through you, convener, yes, what Councillor Flynn is saying makes sense. There is a large, hard standing area in front of the garages that could permit the sort of manoeuvres that Councillor Flynn is describing. So
as a result of that, comparing it to Waterside Cottage, it would actually be, you're not required to answer, in my mind, a bit safer, because it would allow access to the B825 easily. My next question really relates to be for Brent, actually, is that I see there's 4 objections from the one person over a period of time, and it gives a list of the comments of the objections. Are all these associated with those one objector? Because they've obviously come in at different stages with different objections. Does that make sense?
Yeah, that's right. There were 4 representations from the same person that came in over a period of time. So the summary in the report is a summary of all those concerns raised by that objector, as well as including some comments from another party as well.
Right. So it tends to suggest that the objector didn't present all these objections at once, or her objections at once, that they came in with different objections over a period of time. Is that right, Brent?
Yeah, they came in over a period of time. As applications evolve, further information comes in. So
yeah,
I think some of the comments were in response to further information which came in.
Okay, no, thanks for that. Related to the objections, it mentions one of them is that numbers 1 and 2 have a shared septic tank, but this would not cope for the addition of a 5-bedroom house. Has it been declared that any development in this GAP site would be using the same septic tank? Would they not have a septic tank of their own?
I think that's right, Councillor. My understanding is there would be a new septic tank for the.
So that wouldn't be an issue, right? Right. Okay. Thank you. I think that's all my questions, and based on the answers and my thoughts on it, I'd be more than happy to second Bailey Kerr's motion, convener. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Councillor Flynn. We have Councillor Murtagh, and then I'm sure it's Councillor Bowes there. Yep, Councillor Murtagh.
I'm just going to check you can hear me, convener. Is that right?
Yep.
Can you hear? Okay.
Yeah.
I just wanted to go back to Craig Russell there, just on what was being said, because I'm scrolling back to the recommendations in the report, and on the point about the kind of the turning space for the driver, because obviously it's part of the reasons listed for it not being in accord with the development plan, etc., or to be recommended, and it says specifically about it not complying. So as I just read, the depth of parking space area is non-compliant, and on-site turning facilities for all 3 required parking spaces is unable to be provided, thereby necessitating the reversing of vehicles either onto or out of the site at a location where the road is narrow and the visibility requirement is not met, so that a safe stopping distance cannot be achieved. And then goes on to say that therefore it's not in the interest of road safety. And it's just that the answers that were given to Councillor Flynn there seem to slightly, I'm not say contradict that, but partly and to soften it. So can that be explained a little bit, since it's so clear in the recommendations?
Convener, through you.
Yes, Craig.
It's good to have the opportunity to clarify that. Yeah, Councillor Murtagh, you're quite right. The answer that I gave to Councillor Flynn was really in the context of his comparison between the parking area for Waterside or Riverside Cottage, I can't remember which, versus the application site. So the application site has a much larger hard standing area proposed than the existing cottage down the hill does. So there is a higher likelihood of being able to perform the turning and manoeuvring in order to leave the site in a forward gear at the proposed site. You're quite right, though, it doesn't comply with the sort of turning requirement that we would normally ask for, nor the sort of garage setback distance that we would normally ask for. But it is likely, it is possible that you, with several 4 or 5 point turn, you would perhaps be able to turn a vehicle at the application site. That's with a fair wind behind you, one car parked in the drive. It may be possible. Could I say for absolute certainty? No. I think you would have a much higher likelihood of doing it in the application site than you would at the existing property down the hill. That was the answer I was trying to give, Councillor Flynn, although perhaps not explained as clearly as it was just now.
Thanks, Craig.
No, thank you. I mean, that is helpful. And I think, obviously we have a lot of experience in this committee of, not wanting to compare to other sites where necessarily things weren't at the time, where those maybe got planning permission or just existed, that we have to look at what the situation is now and the planning policies as they are now for each site. It does give me some concern, particularly as it's such a, listed as such a material reason. And I do have familiarity with the road itself, and I'm not saying that it's going to be vastly different from what it was in 2012, but I would note that the trend for wild swimming at the Avon Lagoon was perhaps not established then, so maybe we have increased the traffic there slightly. But it is a challenging road, and I think that those concerns do need to be given significant weight. Obviously, I haven't heard from other members of the committee, but I think it's useful to clarify, what is a very clear recommendation in the report itself. Thank you, convener.
Thank you for your input. Councillor Bowes.
Thank you, convener. Something that's been touched on, and I think Craig touched on it, but actually at the site visit, it was asked of Brent, why are the garages not counted as parking spaces? There was an answer given. I will let Brent or Craig give their own answer, but I think it's reasonably obvious is that people have got a bad habit of turning garages into rooms. Which is my simplistic way of looking at it. I'm sure there's probably a more formal way of saying that. This one I'm a wee bit conflicted with, and I understand the problem that roads have come up with a turning space should those garages not be garages anymore. In particular, it is an infill site. It was asked on site, and it was quite obvious it was an infill site, and that makes me want to support it. The other side of that is I'm concerned about how busy the road is, and I think the figure that Craig gave us there is it was actually quite an astonishing figure, but that's obviously been tested in 2012. I think there's only more cars now than what there was then, I would suggest. Can you just confirm that I'm right in my understanding of that the reason that car parking spaces, the 3 car parking spaces in this case, are not taken into consideration is because they could be converted at some point to not be car parking spaces and be, say, livable, for example, livable rooms?
Convener, through you, I can respond to Councillor Bowes. Yeah, that's part of the reasons, Councillor Bowes. Another one of the reasons is that people typically fill their garages with things that aren't cars. When the National Guide was being drafted, a number of local authorities were involved in that, and there was a lot of discussion about this, and the majority felt that garages were more often used for storing things other than cars inside them. We also understood at the time that there was no planning restriction, which meant that if a house was granted permission with a garage, there wasn't an automatic requirement either to use that garage or to use that garage for a car as opposed to storing stuff in it. So that was the reason that those garages weren't counted as parking spaces. Just to clarify, that applies to any application for housing with a garage in the council area. It's not specific to the current application.
So the other question that was asked, and again, it all ties down to the parking, and I'm right. Sorry, you can confirm if I'm right or not. At one side of the driveway that is actually deep enough, but I think it's the left-hand side. is where it becomes more shallow, and that's where the problem is. It's not the entire parking area, it's only part of it. Am I right?
Through you, convener, yes, that's right.
Okay. Given that, and given the balance of it and where the infill side of the site is, I'm inclined to support Baileycare.
Okay, I'm looking at lights here. I've got a light. There's nobody coming in. Can I come in at the minute? Obviously, going in sight is, to me, is fundamental, especially when you don't know an area. And when I went on site that day, I'm looking at the buildings that were already there, and I found it hard to visualise this other house going in there. But I think it was recognised right away that I think it was classified as a gap site. And Baileycare at the beginning spoke on policies, and that's what we in the planning committee have got to continue to look at in terms of making any decisions. But I think if you go to page 68 on your agenda papers, I think it sets out quite clearly. The fact is that, and I'm going to read it out, I'm not going to bore you, but I'm going to read it out because I think it's important, especially for people that's online, maybe haven't got the paperwork. The additional planning consideration, the proposal is an infill development. So it's stating that it utilises garden ground with the envelope of existing buildings located linearly along the B825 and Station Road and forming part of a small development cluster within the countryside on the outskirts of Linlithgow and is considered acceptable in scale and design. As such, it is not considered that would result in sporadic or intrusive development detrimental to the character of the countryside location or serve to undermine any purpose of the green belt. The primary purpose of the green belt in the Falkirk area is to safeguard the identity of communities by preventing development which would impact on their landscape setting or reduce their visual separation. The proposal would not reduce the visual separation between any of the settlements within the Pullman, Grangewood, Bowness, and Lithgow Greenbelt corridor or adversely impact on their landscape setting. These matters are material planning considerations in support of the application and are considered to justify setting aside the terms of policies 8A Greenbelt and 17A of MPF 4 in this instance. In the conclusion, this application is not considered to accord with the development plan for the reasons detailed in this report. These reasons relate to the Greenbelt and Rural Homes policy under FPF 4 housing in the countryside, policy under LDP2 and associated guidance and placemaking policy relating to creating safer places. However, there are material planning considerations what are considered to justify setting aside policies 8A, Greenbelt and 17A, Rural Homes of MPF 4 in this instance, as detailed above. However, and it speaks about then goes on about the outweighing and the road safety, and we've spoke a lot about the parking and that. So taking everything into consideration, I would agree with who's spoken already, and I'd be quite happy to support this. I'm going now to, is it Councillor Forrest got his light on?
Thanks, convener.
Right, sir.
Thanks. I'm not wanting to upset the apple cart here, but I still do have reservations about this. The age-old traffic survey, 1,700 vehicles way back in 2012. There's been a lot of development in Whitecross, and that is one of the main routes from that road. It isn't just used for the local pub, believe me. I agree with it, how Councillor Murtagh read out the road safety part, such as the indiscriminate parking causing obstruction on the road, effectively making it single lane at some times. I've travelled that road many, many times. I do not like using that road because of the parking. Councillor Bowes brought up about the shape of the parking area. it's smaller to the left than it is to the right when you're facing the building. It's so small that I would say that other than a small car on the left, you would have the tail end of the car hanging over what would potentially be a pavement if it was there, which is the next bit that I would say. You know, there's an awful lot of people walk that road, and there is no pavement, so they've got to adhere to the highway code. And I just worry about the parking there, because while we might well have parking spaces for 2.5 cars in there, certainly don't have it for 3. They may not have 3 cars. It's just I have reservations about this because of the very, very poor view that you've got. There's a turn to the right as you head down that road. It makes it pulls back on the visibility, and in an evening there are a good number of vehicles use that road at speed. There's a great many young drivers use that road, and I think that this could cause a problem. I'm not wanting to move against it, but I do have my reservations there.
Thank you, sir. I think we've got Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Convener. And I have similar reservations to Councillor Forrest. I mean, I think, you know, I completely agree with you, Convener, in the way that you have outlined the examination of policy, and that is entirely correct. I mean, that is where we have to go as a committee always. And I think, whereas maybe it isn't always the case in some of the other applications we've looked at, that there are some mitigating factors which do, you know, would be applicable to, you know, the Greenbelt situation, etc. And I think it's very important to consider that, and you're right to point that out. I think but not all of those, you know, not all of the policies in which this application is in breach have been overcome, and I think the recommendations are very clear about the road safety situation. I do want to just pick you up, Convener, on one point, however, in terms of the access for people that are online and maybe with us not having papers. I have 3 screens in front of me here, and 2 phones and an iPad that I am able to very quickly use searchable functions on to go and find different bits and papers, and also have the maps and location plans up instantly to be able to look through. So while everybody doesn't work similarly, this is an excellent way for me to be able to consider all the evidence before. So I just want to make that point.
Well, Mark, sorry, just on that point, just to say that apologies, but my comments were based on maybe people with the general public that were picking it up. I wasn't talking about members, because I'd be aware that members would receive all the information. Thanking you.
No, apologies if I picked you up then wrong, Convener. I just wanted to make that point in case MD Online was thinking that we didn't have access to that information. We very much do, and it's very useful to be able to compare like that. But in doing so, I think that it gives the ability of looking at the elevations and the way that the slope. I think it, you know, and you're right, going on site and being aware of the situation, you do get the sense of just the scale of the development and how it will impact into the landscape, how that sort of, you know, access into the property. And I think that in itself gives me concerns in terms of road safety as it's outlined in the report. And, you know, whereas similar to Councillor Forrest, I'm picking up from the rest of the committee that there seems to be a majority that are comfortable that the policies have been assuaged, or, you know, that we're happy to overturn the officer's recommendations. But I myself am not comfortable entirely with that. And I don't know if there are any other contributions to be made, but I would consider that if there are other contributions to be made. Thanks, Convener.
Thanks again for your input, Councillor Murtagh. I'm looking round here. I'm going to bring Mr. Henderson in a minute just to clarify where we are, but I'm just looking round. There's nobody else want to come in at this stage. Mr. Henderson, would you like to come in and just give us an overview? Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Convener. It was just to pick up on a point in relation to the motion by Bailey Kerr, seconded by Councillor Flynn. And I note it related in particular to the development being considered infill development. And I think you read out, Convener, the terms of paragraph 7B8. So I would like to perhaps initially check with Bailey Kerr and Councillor Flynn if they are in agreement with what is written at 7B8, and that's an explanation of infill development. I noted also that the comment was made as part of the motion that the committee would be satisfied that the development's acceptable in terms of placemaking and local living considerations. So I think these are I think primarily the points that were raised earlier, but it was just to pick up on the point that the recommendation is very clear on road safety, and I think I would suggest the reason would want to say that the committee was satisfied in relation to road safety, and I think also appearance of a site is always an important point. Yeah. And I would just like to clarify if the committee is satisfied as to the appearance of the development and its relationship to its surroundings. And as a final point, would the committee be willing in terms of the motion to delegate to the Director of Place Services to impose appropriate conditions on any grant of permission? So now I'm just looking to see whether or not the mover and seconder have any issues with what I've just said.
Happy with that, Ian.
Councillor Flynn? Okay, but just to clarify where we are, because we haven't stopped this debate, the situation is quite clear. We have a motion moved and seconded to grant the application before us, with the conditions as stated by Mr. Henderson. Is there anybody otherwise minded at this stage? We can agree the recommendation then well, we can agree which came forward, the motion to grant the application.
Convener.
Councillor Murtagh.
Just, I don't often do this because, like I say, I can see the mood of the committee, but just from the point of view that it would allow me to record my discomfort with the decision. I understand to do that I need to actually move a motion that could then be, whether it was seconded or not, but I would like to record my dissent to the thing, and if I need to move a motion to do that, then I'll move the officer's recommendations.
Mr. Henderson, do you want to come in on that point?
Thank you, Convener. And yes, I think the expression of dissent is where an amendment to their motion has been moved by a councillor in these circumstances.
Okay, Councillor Forrest. Councillor Forrest.
I would also like to, thank you, Convener. I'd also like to record my dissent.
Okay, fine. Thank you.
Apologies, can I quickly clarify, Councillor Murtagh, were you proposing an amendment?
Yeah, I'll move an amendment to the effect of the officer's recommendations.
Councillor Forrest.
I'll second that.
Okay. Yes, we'll do. Thanks. Okay, that now takes us into a situation where we'll need to go to a vote in relation to the fact is we've got a motion agreed to agree the amendments to agree the recommendation contained within the report, but we'll get the earlier motion to agree to the application to grant. Mr. Henderson.
Thank you, Convener. So we have a motion by Bailey Kerr, which has been seconded by Councillor Flynn, and that is to grant planning permission. And my note of the motion, and apologies for reading it out maybe some length, but the committee, having considered the report, the development plan and the material considerations, agrees to grant planning permission as the following considerations are considered to be as such weight as to indicate that the development plan should not be accorded priority. The first reason is, I think, a repeat of paragraph 7B8 from the officer's report in relation to infill development. Secondly, the committee is satisfied that the development proposal is acceptable in terms of placemaking and local living considerations. Thirdly, the committee is satisfied as to matters of parking access and egress and road safety. And fourthly, the committee is satisfied as to the appearance of the proposed development and its relationship to its surroundings. And finally, the committee agrees to delegate to the Director of Police Services the imposition of appropriate conditions. And we then have an amendment by Councillor Murtagh, which has been seconded by Councillor Forrest, and that is to refuse permission in accordance with the officer recommendations. So on the basis of a roll call vote, Provost Bissett is absent, so Councillor Bowes.
Motion.
Bailey Buchanan.
Motion.
Councillor Colley.
Motion.
Councillor Flynn.
Motion.
Councillor Forrest.
Amendment.
Councillor Kelly.
Motion.
Bailey Kerr.
Motion.
Councillor Murtagh.
Amendment.
Councillor Nimmo.
Amendment.
Councillor Redmond.
Motion.
And Councillor Sinclair.
Motion.
So we have 8 votes for the motion and 3 votes for the amendment, and the motion is accordingly carried. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Mr Henderson. That takes us on to item 7 on your agenda today, construction of covered area retrospective at 18 Weir Crescent, Denny, for Mr Paul Jeffrey. It's a continuation, it's pages 73 to 83. Before we go into our officer, who will be Brent Vivian, giving the report, we say that an application has been made by Councillor Brian McCabe, the local member, to be received as a deputation to be heard in respect of this item of business. Have we agreed to hear Councillor McCabe?
Agreed.
Agreed. Okay, thank you. That takes us then to a report. Brent Vivian, thank you, sir.
Thank you, Convener. Members will recall that the committee considered this application on the 17th of April, when it was agreed to continue the application to allow officers to consider representations made by Councillor McCabe. The 4 points in the report are in response to those representations. The first point is that permitted development rights are granted by the Town and Country Planning General Permitted Development Scotland Order as amended. The order grants plenty of permission for classes of specific types of developments, but most classes are subject to a set of limitations and conditions. The class applicable to this application is Class 1A, which provides for any enlargement of a dwelling house by way of a single-storey ground floor extension. The Class 1A limitations are set out in paragraph 4 of the report. The development is not permitted by Class 1A as the amount of development within the rear curtilage of the property, when factoring in the extension and taking into account the existing hard surfacing and decking, exceeds the 50% limitation. The other conditions under Class 1A are satisfied. Turning to the second point, there is no legislation which defines the size or height of a residential extension or outbuilding that would be deemed to be acceptable. Where planning permission is required, the application is assessed against the relevant policies of the development plan. As committee will be aware, a planning application is to be determined in accordance with the development plan unless material considerations indicate otherwise. The previous report, which was presented at the April committee meeting, assessed the application against the relevant policies of the development plan and considered the material planning considerations. As committee will also be aware, assessment of compliance or otherwise with the relevant policies of the development plan often requires the exercise of planning judgment. Turning to the third point, planning permission is not required to form hard surfacing or decking areas at ground level within the rear curtilage of a dwelling house. However, the extent of existing hard surfacing and decking is a factor in determining whether planning permission is required for a residential extension or outbuilding. The rear curtilage in this case contains hard surface areas and decking and was therefore taken into account in determining whether planning permission is required. The applicant has confirmed that all grass areas within the rear garden comprise artificial grass laid on the original base surface with sand laid on top of the base surface to aid levelling and drainage. The artificial grass is not considered a hard surface in this instance. The applicant has advised that there is no surface water drainage for the pergola. If the pergola wasn't there, rainwater would land on the decking, hard surfacing beneath the structure. The pergola is therefore likely to have had a neutral effect in terms of drainage and runoff. Turning to the fourth point, the application was accompanied by photographs of the extension. The Development Management Unit will accept photographs instead of elevation drawings in the case of a retrospective application. The application form indicated that the pergola had been installed incorrectly as the height was 2.7 metres instead of the permitted 2.5 metres within 1 metre of the boundary. However, it is understood that the applicant may have thought the applicable class under the order was Class 3A, which applies to a building within the curtilage of a dwelling house for any purpose incidental to the enjoyment of the house. Under the Class 3A limitations and conditions, planning permission is required if any part of the development within 1 metre of the boundary would exceed 2.5 metres in height. The correct class for the development is Class 1A, as explained in the report. Committee was shown photographs at the previous committee meeting taken by the case officer. These photos showed the extension and other development within the rear garden and can be shown again if required. It is considered that the committee has sufficient information to determine the application. In conclusion, it is not considered that any new matters have been raised that would alter the previous recommendation to grant planning permission. Thank you, Convener.
Thank you, Brent. I think it would be advisable at this time to show the photographs before we bring in the deputation. Would you just like to give us an explanation of what we're seeing, Brent, as we're going along?
So that's looking at, obviously it's a retrospective application. So what you see is what the application is for. It's for the extension of the rear elevation of the building, which takes the form of an open pergola. So that's a photo taken from the rear boundary, looking back towards the house and towards the new development. That's looking the other way from the rear of the house towards the rear boundary, and you can see there's obviously a fairly large outbuilding already on the property, which committee might recall was considered by committee back in 2020, I believe. You'll also see elements of the hard surfacing area on the site and the artificial grass areas as well. And that's a side view looking at the structure. And you'll also pick up a hard surfacing area just to the right and slightly under the covered area, which is an outdoor hot tub. Yeah, I think that's a site plan. I think obviously from the photos, it's quite clear what the development is. So I think.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Brent. This is an opportunity now for Councillor Brian McCabe, a local member, to be received at the deputation and heard in respect of this item of business. you know that what's happening here. Councillor McCabe, you've got 10 minutes, then an opportunity for members to ask any questions. Could also say at this stage, maybe accept my apology for the fact is that I know that the last meeting we had, that you waited nearly all day, and then because of external circumstances and the information that was received that needed an opportunity to be looked at, that we had to continue this till now. So carry on, sir.
Absolutely no apology necessary.
Right.
Convener, I realise committee business can take, you don't know how long it's going to take, so absolutely no apology required. Thanks.
10 minutes. Thank
you. This site has had 2 enforcement notices placed upon it since 2020. In 2020, a retrospective application P200233 full was approved based on inaccurate information provided to the committee. In contravention of policy 8C08 residential extensions and alterations, the outbuilding constituted overdevelopment of the site, leaving less than 50% of the remaining garden. Based on the erroneous figure of 48.8% rear garden coverage, the actual coverage figure was 71.9%. It's not even close. Planning approval should never have been granted. Currently, contrary to the submitted drawings, there are 0 grass remains in the back garden, and as such, the site is already well overdeveloped. This is admitted in the officer report, permitted development rights in paragraph 5. 0 grass remains in the back garden. That's been admitted in paragraph 7. Something that I found particularly unhelpful is no drawings or photographs accompanied the application. You can have a look at the application form. It gives the applicant the opportunity to indicate what drawings, what papers, and what photographs, if any, he has submitted. None are indicated. No drainage considerations have been given to the pergola, and that's admitted in paragraphs 8 and 9 of the report. There's something like 16% of undeveloped garden remain, nowhere near the 50% acceptable figure. NFP 4 Policy 1, tackling the climate and nature crisis, is the guiding principle on where I'm coming from here. Let me just say at the outset, I don't have any animus or any interest in this application, whatever. It's entirely down to the committee. Whether they approve or whether they refuse it makes no difference to me whatsoever. What I will say, though, is the amount of rear garden that remaining undeveloped is about 16%. The figure should be 50. These were the previous photographs of the previous application. It shows extensive overdevelopment. This application seeks to exacerbate an already approved but contravening site. As one of approximately 600 houses within the development that this site sits in, approval of this application could lead to similar applications where 90 to 100% of the rear garden curtilage are covered or developed in hard-standing or outbuildings with 0 consideration to site drainage. This has significant cost implications to the local authority. Less than 200 metres from this site, the construction of Den Eastern Access Road, probably opening within the next couple of weeks, has necessitated in the provision of 3 very large suds ponds. This development is a complete contradiction of the council's green targets and policies. No consideration has been given at all to the surface water discharge from this site. Multiply this by 600 other houses within the development and we have serious, serious problems. It's up to the committee to decide whether they honour and respect the council's own climate change initiatives or ignore them and award planning approval. And I will point out, the awarding of planning permission will make not a jot of difference to the drainage issues emanating from this site. But what it will do is indicate carte blanche to others to do exactly the same thing without fear of repercussion or accountability. This is a major problem if you committee, do not recognise this. The water emanating from a site, 600 other sites like this, where we do nothing about it, leads to us having to put in further sludge ponds, drainage implications. So the idea, as I say, I have no animus towards, I don't even know the applicant. I've never been to the site. It's just the fact that what we're doing is allowing development contravening planning legislation. There's no question of that. And if we allow it to continue, we suffer the consequences. This is not about me developing my own ground. I'm perfectly happy. I think it looks quite nice. There's not an inch of that back garden that has any grass in it. It's all been developed. The areas of hard standing were already there. Just a figure that I have. So many documentation that there is within guidelines. There are ways to work out the rear curtilage. You take the rear curtilage, you subtract the area of the house, you subtract areas of hard standing, and then you divide it by 2 to give you the 50% figure. The previous development authorised by the awarding of P20233 is technically flawed. And as such, it would be legally suspect, I'm suggesting to you, to actually award permission for this permission, the current application. The previous application contravenes legislation. Authorising this one would only exacerbate an already regrettable decision, I would suggest to you. I have somewhere within all my figures. Technically, the previous submission for the big outhouse, if you go by the figures, it's a 25 square metre outhouse. Going by the right figures, that should have been no bigger than 4 square metres. That already contravenes the planning legislation. I'll leave it there, convener. I think I've made my point. And again, I've no interest. Award it, refuse it. It makes absolutely no difference to me. What it does is it impacts the policies of this council. It was looking towards climate change, trying to protect other community members, next door neighbours further down the line. Thank you, convener.
Okay. You just sit there, Councillor McCabe. Have an opportunity for members to ask any questions of Councillor McCabe at this time. We have Councillor Nimmo.
Yep, thanks, convener. And thanks, Brian. Thanks for your presentation and your contribution there. I'm just wondering, with the serious concerns that Councillor McCabe has raised in relation to this application, are officers going to change their recommendation to grant based on what we've just heard?
Well, at this stage, Councillor Nimmo, it's questions directly to Councillor McCabe on his submission. There'll be an opportunity to come back to Brent or any other officer once Councillor McCabe is finished his area.
I'll rephrase my question then, convener, and I'll put it to Councillor McCabe. Brian, do you think that based on what you've said, the officers should be changing their recommendation?
Thanks, Councillor Nimmo. Yeah, 100% they should be changing it. I realise there's a difficulty for the officers because to do this, there's almost an admission that the previous application shouldn't have been approved either. The reason I say that quite specifically is within, again, if you bear with me, no drainage considerations have been given to the pergola, and that's admitted in paragraph 8 and 9 of the officer report. I'll just have a quick gander at that too. Yep. The applicant has advised that there is no surface water drainage for the pergola. If the pergola wasn't there, rainwater would land on the decking, hard surfacing beneath the structure. The pergola is therefore likely to have had a neutral effect in terms of the drainage runoff. What they're saying is that even approving this or refusing it makes absolutely no difference to the site conditions here. It already contravenes legislation. It already contravenes the council's policy to try and keep on top of flooding issues. We're just going to ignore that if we don't take cognizance. So I genuinely do feel that the council officers, Alan, should be reconsidering their proposals and should be recommending it for refusal. The only reason for that, it makes physically no difference on site. But what it does is it sends out a signal. Remember, these two applications that the applicant has put forward came from two enforcement notices. These were retrospective planning applications. Thanks for your question. Thanks, Alan.
Yeah, thanks, Brian.
Thank you, Councillor Nimmo. Any other question? Oh, Councillor Kerr. Barely Kerr, sorry.
Thanks, Convener.
Apologies.
Councillor McCabe, it is the pergola we're talking about here, eh? About refusing the pergola.
It is Billy Kerr, and what I've said is it makes absolutely no difference at all, other than it sends out the signal that you're accepting something which contravenes planning legislation.
So,
if
that's maybe a question. Sorry, Brent.
Sorry, that maybe wasn't the greatest of answers, Billy Kerr. If, for instance, let me just say this. Had the area covered by the pergola been grass underneath it, and the application was for the pergola to cover that, I would say to you, yes, you must refuse that, because it takes over the limit, because that then becomes an area, which is not draining away naturally. It's not going into the Solum to drain away naturally. That's if the area underneath the pergola had been totally grass. It's not. It already is an area of hard standing which does not drain naturally. There's no drainage mitigation being installed within the rear curtilage. I hope that explains it a wee bit better.
Yeah, thank you very much. I've 2 or 3 questions for officers when the opportunity comes.
It's direct questions to Councillor McCabe at this stage. About anybody else? Councillor Flynn.
Yep, thank you, Convener. For Councillor McCabe, apologies if I missed it, Brian, but when we're looking at, I'm looking at page 83 and it shows a site plan, and it seems to show that the front garden is almost the same size as the back garden, and there is a portion of garden down the side of the house. I'm calling it garden, but it's an access pathway or whatever. Do your figures represent the front garden as well? I mean, I haven't been to the site, but what does the front garden look like? Is it grass or whatever? Thanks.
A good question, Councillor Flynn, and hopefully I can explain it a wee bit for you. As far as this application is concerned, it's all to do with the rear curtilage of the site. So therefore the front curtilage, i.e. anything in front of the front elevation, you don't consider. So what you do consider is anything behind the front elevation. So that basically takes in the area of hard standing to the right-hand side of the property. I don't know if you'll be able to see this, Councillor Flynn. Yeah. So it takes consideration of this area here and all of that area around the back. Now that is ostensibly is the area of rear curtilage, and because of the what would have been the grassed area within the rear curtilage. So this area of hard standing all around here, plus the shed that was granted permission, plus the area of hard standing here, technically it leaves this area, and this area, which, as I say, are not actually grass, they're artificial turf. So that contravenes the 50% figure. So I have taken into consideration, Jim, the area of hard standing within the rear curtilage. The front curtilage isn't considered. Yeah.
Okay. No, thanks. I understand the numbers now, Brian. Thank you. Thanks, Convener.
Councillor Murtagh.
Thanks, Convener. I probably have a few questions of officers, but I suppose from what Councillor McCabe is kind of highlighting, I suppose I wanted to ask him about, like, you mentioned about the pergola. I mean, the pergola is effectively a permanent umbrella, if you like. That's the function of it. And as you allude to, the hard standing underneath, like, it will have a neutral impact, as it's stated in the report. Do you not feel that maybe the problem is more in terms of the planning policy, and that that there are not, if you could effectively, as I understand it, make your whole garden artificial grass or a series of hot tubs or whatever. Yeah, and that's part of the issue here, that what you're identifying is that, yes, I would agree that this has a detrimental impact, especially on environmental and climate change targets, in terms of the effect it has. But in terms of when we're going to be considering this application, we've got to look at, what is to be agreed, which is the existence of the pergola, and that what you're highlighting is more that there's a flaw in what that enables in terms of planning policy, rather than about this application.
I don't know if that's strictly true, Councillor Murtagh. Just as a wee aside, it's good that you posed that question, because I actually posed a similar question to Mr. Dryden. I forwarded him 2 visuals. One of them followed on the back of a wee comment that Councillor Colley made at the last meeting, where she said, the inclement weather we had, it'd be good if maybe we had a pergola which covered the full garden, the full rear garden. I actually presented a visual to Mr. Dryden to say, using Councillor Colley's example here, I covered the full garden and said, is this acceptable? What figure is acceptable? I haven't had a response yet from Mr. Dryden on it. Maybe you'll give it. Yeah, he's just going out the door there. Bye. But I was trying to get the figure, and it seems that the figure is the 50% figure. This application, the previous application, blows it out the water. It doesn't go anywhere near satisfying the 50% figure. I don't know if Ian wants to come in. No.
Yeah.
I think the point is, we mean conservation. I understand what you're saying. It implies that everything should be negative. If it reaches a threshold, be refused. That's not how community development works. As you know, the recent training session they undertake. The legislation is there to grant certain categories of development.
Ian, can you put your light on?
Oh, sorry. Grant development up to a certain level. It then means that if it breaches that level, it doesn't automatically mean refusal should be refused. It requires to be assessed on the merits of each individual case with regard to development plan policies. And that's the fundamental issue with permitted development, is it doesn't automatically say if it breaches a certain figure or threshold, it should be refused. It means then a planning application is formally required, which in this case has been required. The reasons for that are explained in the report, and then each case is assessed on its individual merits.
Thanks, Ian. It was a very long way to no answer the question I'd actually posed. The question I totally accept what Ian's saying. I mean, I'm not calling that into question. But what I was looking for, permitted development rights is not permitted here by the 2 applications. They came from 2 enforcement notices. They didn't. All I was trying to get is to try and allow the committee here to know what figure, if the permitted development rights of 50% is not met, what figure is actually that.
I think we understand that. I think we understand that. It's direct questions to you just now, and then we'll come back to officers. Is there any other direct questions? I think, is it Councillor Bowes there, Light? Yeah. Thank you, sir.
Councillor McCabe, you spoke about the artificial grass and hard standing as if it won't cause any drainage. Are you aware of British Standard 7044? Right, it's actually British Standard for artificial grass, which makes it completely porous, and also it's been sanded as well, which I think Brent's also covered as well. So I think you need to take the artificial grassed areas as something that is actually porous and will actually drain water away into the ground. Sorry, just to make you aware of that, you sort of indicated that it wouldn't do. So any water that hit the pergola, if it comes down and gets to the artificial grass, it will drain into the ground naturally.
It doesn't make any difference to my argument in the fact that there's overdevelopment.
But do you agree that it makes it porous?
Absolutely. And what I've said is that there's I think it's remaining 16 square metres that's still porous, yeah, but there's 96, 94 square metres it's not.
Any other questions directly to Councillor McCabe? Online? No? Okay, sir, you can retake your seat, sir, and thank you.
Thanks, Convener.
Convener, just one.
Yes, carry on, Councillor Forrest.
Are you aware that there is a new fashion in pergolas? There's two different types. There is a fixed roof and there's a wind back roof. Now, given that I can't see from the pictures whether it's a fixed roof or whether it's a wind back, but basically you wind it back and it'll concertinas against the wall. I don't see if that is the type, but given that that is the fashion, it's highly unlikely that it's going to be put out in a rainstorm, thereby depriving the ground from the water. It's just I've been having a wee look about getting one of my own, and these are the considerations that I'm having. Whether it should be fixed or whether it should be a concertina type.
Okay,
thanks.
Thank you for your input, sir. So no more questions directly to Councillor McCabe. He can retake his seat.
Thanks, Convener.
Now it's an opportunity to ask questions. I believe that Brent has had to go, emergency meeting in Ryan McDonough's. Is Brent still there? Yes, good, Brent. That's fine. I want to come into you right away, Brent, in relation to some of the issues that that our colleague Councillor McCabe brought up. One of them is obviously we've seen the photographs, and he states quite clearly about overdevelopment. So, what's your response to that?
Well, I think it's need to really be clear on why this requires planning permission. So it's a Class 1A proposal, requires planning permission because the site coverage as a result of the pergola exceeds the 50% limitation. I mean, our calculation is with the pergola in place, the site coverage is 55%, so that's 5% over the limitation. And the way you calculate that is you add the big shed and the small shed on site and the pergola, which gives you a figure. Then you divide it by the size of the rear curtilage minus the size of the original house and minus the hard surfacing and decking areas on the site. So through that calculation, we've come up with a figure that site coverage after with the pergola being in place is 55%. So that's on that basis, planning permission is required because you're over the 50% limit. Now, just because you exceed the 50% limit and you require planning permission, that doesn't mean there's anything to justify necessarily refusing the application on that basis. What it means is that it takes you to a situation where you have to assess an application against the development plan policies and any material considerations. And that was done in the first report before you in April. And the relevant policies to this application are policy 16 of NPF4 and policy HC08 of LDP2. And their policy assessment against those policies is set out in 7A.5 of your original report. And that policy assessment is to look at things like impact on the character or the environmental quality of the home or the surroundings, whether the size of the structure is over dominant or out of scale with the house or surroundings, whether adequate or sufficient usable garden ground is maintained on the site, and whether there would be any detrimental impact on neighbouring properties in terms of, things like overshadowing or overlooking. And, the assessment is quite clear on the original report that there are no issues in terms of those matters which would justify a refusal of the application. There's been mentioned by Councillor McCabe of the extent of development on the site. As was said in the update report, you don't require planning permission to hard surface or place decking within your rear garden if it's at ground level. So you could in theory pave or deck the entire rear garden without requiring planning permission. However, the point is, though, if you want to construct a structure or an outbuilding or an extension on the property, then the extent of hard surfacing or decking can impact on whether you need planning permission or not. Just one other point. In terms of the artificial grass, that's not counted within the hard surface calculation. We wouldn't see that as development. For the points already raised, it's a soft surface, and it allows for drainage. So, and you saw on the photographs that there remains a reasonable area within the site which is comprised of an artificial grass finish. And as I said, our calculation of site coverage with the pergola in place is 55%. Thank you, Convener.
Well, thank you very much, Brent. Any other questions directed to officers at this stage? Daily Care.
Thanks, Convener. So just to clarify, Brent, is this getting done under permitted development or is it a plan application?
It's a planning application because the limitation of 50% site coverage is exceeded. So that triggers the requirement for the planning application, which is what's before you today for consideration. And as I've outlined in terms of the relevant policy considerations, we're recommending approval of the application.
So it's irrelevant whether there's 90% the garden being done. It's a plan application that'll be done on the merit of the policies. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's correct. The exceeding the 50% limit triggers the requirement for a planning application, which then means that through assessment of the application, you need to go to the relevant policies of the development plan to make a determination.
Thanks. I say every meeting, Convener, as people's interpretation of the policies. Thank you.
Councillor Forrest.
Thanks. Brent, just for my own personal information, as I said, I couldn't see the pictures clearly enough to see if this was a permanent roof on the pergola or whether it's one of the new wind back ones. Have you any idea?
Can we bring up the photos?
It looks flat, but when it's wound down, it is completely flat. And I don't see the winding mechanism. Thank you. It's still not clear, but on the new ones, there is a winding mechanism, so like a pedal for a bike, where you can wind back the roof and it just concertinas back. I can't see from that whether it is or not, but it's something that we should actually take into consideration because it's then not a permanent coverage, but it is a permanent structure. The roof can actually go back to maybe about 4 or 5 inches from the back wall, and I can't see that. So sadly, it doesn't look like it's one of the new ones. Thank you for that. Thanks, Brent.
Councillor Nimmo.
Yeah, thanks, convener. Brent, just going back to Councillor McCabe's presentation, he mentioned another figure of 16% in relation to the rear garden. Could you maybe just comment on that? It's just looking at the photographs, it does look as if the rear garden has been overdeveloped. But again, that's just my personal opinion in relation to what I've seen.
It's the 16% figure is not one that I recognise. The site coverage we've calculated is 55%. So obviously that leaves a 45% area, which would comprise the presumably that comprises the artificial grass areas on the site that you can see in the photographs.
Okay, thanks, Brent.
Councillor Flynn.
Yeah, thank you, convener. A very, very quick question for Brent. If the pergola wasn't there, would the applicant have need planning permission to put the decking in and to put the hot tub in?
No, there's no planning permission required for the decking that's on the property, or for the or for the hard surface that the tub sits on, or for the tub itself.
So nothing would really change with the pergola being there. I mean, it's the status quo remains exactly the same, apart from the retrospective planning permission. Is that right? Yeah.
Well, in terms of what's on the actual ground of the property, there's no change.
Yeah. Thanks, Brent. Thanks, convener. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Flynn. Any other? Yes, Councillor Sinclair.
Yeah, thanks, convener. I think on the basis of the questions that have been answered so far and the information that's been provided to us as a committee, I'd be content to move the recommendations in the report.
Thank you. Have we got a seconder there? Councillor Bowes.
Happy to second.
Okay, just to clarify where we are, we have a motion moved and seconded to grant the application. Is there anybody otherwise minded? Councillor Murtagh.
I mean, I actually think this is a really difficult one, and I'm actually quite glad that Councillor McCabe has highlighted it. Although don't take that as a precedent, Councillor McCabe, because that's not always my view. But I think that the problem is here, as Councillor Flynn was just illustrating, and as Brent answered, that the planning policy, might mean we could, as I said earlier, have a garden entirely composed of hard standing and hot tubs, and some of the difficulties in terms of the drainage, which Councillor McCabe was bringing up, I think are serious, and they're important aspects in it. Whereas I know Councillor Bowes was saying, and it was acknowledged, that grass, artificial grass is porous. It's not necessarily something which I think it might impact to help with the flooding aspect, but it certainly doesn't help with the biodiversity aspect. And porous or not, bees are not particularly drawn to it. So I think those issues, the issues of the wider planning policies, I think are important to highlight. And I do, in myself, my personal view, looking at the layout, I do think it is overdevelopment. I mean, and that's not based on a number of, whether it's 55% or 60 or 77. In terms of the Ree Garden, it does appear to be overdevelopment. And I think that, the difficulty here is that, as Bailey Kerr was saying, we have to go on what planning policy says, regardless of maybe even what our personal opinion is here. And I think that is where the difficulty is that the granting of the pergola, I think, will make no difference to the flooding concerns, or to whether it's overdevelopment or not, because it's already developed at ground level. And I think in that is the difficulty. I think the problems that has been illustrated are probably more with the way that planning policy works. You know, because as I say, in my opinion, it is overdevelopment, and I don't think it's particularly, my personal opinion, it's particularly an attractive way to do it. So I have sympathy with Councillor McCabe, and I think it has illustrated some of the flaws in planning policy here, but I'm not sure on what basis we would have the ability to not grant it, accepting that. And I would state very clearly, I do think it's significant that we note as a committee how regrettable it is that yet again, based on a retrospective planning permission and enforcement, to bring it to this, that we are you know, considering this. I think it needs to be very strongly said from committee, this is not the regular way to do it, and it should certainly not be encouraged. And I would certainly look at you know, the issues around that, because I do have concerns about passing something in that kind of way. But regrettably, I don't see that there would be grounds to refuse it, and I think that if we did, based on what's been put forward, that it would have significant ability on appeal to be overturned. And on that basis, so, you know, having made those points, I don't have an alternative to move. Thanks, convener.
Thanks for your input. We're going to bring Mr. Dryden in to give us his perspective of the situation. Mr. Dryden.
Thank you, convener. No, I think certainly the debate's been very useful, and I think certainly comments raised by Councillor McCabe and Councillor Murtagh particularly there sum up the issue. And I think those of you who were at the recent training on permitted development, we did certainly make it quite clear. You know, we had Neil Collar from Brodie's, who's a highly regarded planning lawyer, and I think the message coming out of that was, we're not here to defend the legislation, but there is a recognition that there are elements of the legislation that probably needs to be updated. Actually, by implication, talked about Class 1A. There have been changes over the years on permitted development, and I fully expect that there's actually more changes coming in on other elements of permitted development on the 24th of May. And this will continue with going through the new planning bill. I think there are changes in fashion in garden grounds. I think some of the points made about the cumulative effect is something that will continue to have to be monitored. But at this point in time, we have to be mindful of the legislation that we have before us, the parameters that we have to operate within. And therefore, we're not here to defend that, but we have to apply that legislation. And that's not a local issue to Falkirk Council, that's a national issue. And all I'm saying is that I expect there will be further amendments to come up in due course, and they will be done. And I think there will be appropriate times for yourselves as a planning committee and for wider members to be part of that training as and when that arrives. So it's really just to bring this back to the focus that sometimes something could be perceived as fighting a rearguard action, and sometimes we are with the legislation, but we have to apply the legislation as it stands with us. And therefore, I think going back to today's recommendation, the fact is that this is a planning application required because it breached the threshold as advised by Brent, and we have assessed it, and the view is obviously officers, it's not overdevelopment as it stands, but I do certainly share some of the concerns that you have. Thank you, convener.
Thank you for your input, sir. Okay, just to clarify where we are, we have a motion moved and seconded to grant the application. Is there anybody otherwise minded? Is that Councillor Redmond? Come in, sir.
Not otherwise minded, but I just I think it has been a useful debate. You know, it's obviously highlighted some concerns, and you know, we're talking a lot about legislation and things, but I suppose my sort of thoughts are, I think there's a lot of kind of people don't understand about drainage and about the impacts they, you know, a lot of things they do in their gardens, and how, you know, if you cover your full grass and astroturf and decking everywhere or patio, you know, the water's going to go somewhere. So it is, I don't know how we make people more aware of drainage, but then at the sort of same time, I think, you know, people's gardens, it's their own personal space. And I think we kind of need to be mindful as, you know, a council and about legislation as well. We don't really want to be starting to micromanage people's gardens and being overly descriptive of what they can and can't do. You know, it's a family home at the end of the day, and they're using the garden the best way that they see fit, and just sort of try to balance it up. I think it we should go ahead, but I think there is maybe something to, there's definitely a lot to be said about people being aware of drainage issues and how what you can and can't do in your garden would affect drainage. But I just wanted to put that in. You know, I think people's gardens, it's their own space. We need to be mindful of that as well. Thanks.
No, thanks for your input, Councillor Redmond. Okay, then, just to clarify again, we've got a motion moved and seconded to grant this application. Is there anybody otherwise minded? No, we all agreed?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Okay, thank you. Now, items 8 and items 9 have been moved to sites at the very beginning, so that takes us to the last item on your agenda this morning. It's construction of veterinary care facility, dwelling house, parking and access and change of use of land to form exercise area at land to the northwest of Nathy Falls Barn, Falkirk, per Mr Brian Allen. It's a continuation. It's pages 120 to 150, and the report will be coming forward by...
Sorry, I'm just about to disappear. I just want to pass on sincere best wishes to Mr Dryden and maybe not see him, so I just wanted to take the opportunity.
Okay.
Okay, thanks very much.
And thank you for that. Okay, I'll just go back to...
Convener, I'm in the toilet. Can we have a small...
Yes, indeed. 5 minute break.
5 minute break,
5 minute
please.
for break. Councillor Corley, are you having to go away?
Yes, I am. So I'll have to give my apologies for the rest of the meeting.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Who are we waiting on? We're waiting on somebody. Is that everybody back? Okay, everybody, thank you very much for that. We'll now reconvene the meeting. We're going to the last item on the agenda this morning, which is item 10, construction of veterinary care facility, dwelling house, parking and access, and change of use of land to form exercise area land to the northwest of Nappy Falls Barn, Falkirk, from Mr. Brian Allen. It's pages 120 to 150 in your agenda papers, and the report is by our officer, Julie Seidel-Gregory. Thank you very much, Julie.
Thank you, Convener. If possible, can we see the plans and photographs for this application, please? This application refers to the development of a dwelling house and a veterinarian care facility at land to the northwest of Nappy Falls House, Falkirk. The application site is undeveloped agricultural land in a relatively remote rural area to the northeast of Slomanan. This application is for matters specified in conditions which relates to the approval of any detailed aspects of a development which are required before that development can begin. Members will recall that planning permission P220639 full was hybrid, as the change of use of land to form an exercise area could not be dealt with in principle. That application was fairly recently heard by committee, so some members may recall this proposal. The consultation responses are detailed at section 4 of your report. Members should note the comments of the Roads Development Unit at section 4.3 and 4.4. The proposed access as shown does not meet the minimum visibility standards, and the Roads Development have raised road safety concerns in this regard. There were no public representations as detailed in section 6 of your report. This application is referred to Planning Committee for determination as it's assessed as being contrary to the development plan, with specific reference to the principle of development in the rural area, sustainable transportation and tackling the climate emergency and nature crisis. The full policy assessment is at section 7A of your report. The recent decision of the Planning Committee established the principle of development and is a strong material planning consideration which outweighs the development plan and supports the application in this case. Notwithstanding any policy concerns in relation to the principle of development, the proposed development is well designed and sited sensitively on the site. In relation to road safety concerns, it's noted that Planning Committee did consider these concerns in relation to planning application P220639 full and were satisfied. It's considered that the applicant has shown the proposed access at the location which would appear to achieve the best possible visibility in both directions, which is considered acceptable on balance in this case. It's recommended that committee grant this application. Members will note that there were several issues which were not fully addressed by this submission, which is reflected in the suggested conditions at section 9 of your report. Thank you, Convener.
Hey, thank you very much, Julie. It's open to members now. Anybody like to come in on this application? Are we quite happy to agree the recommendation contained within the report?
Agreed.
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 Agreed. Everybody agreed then, unanimously?
Yep.
And that brings us to the end of the meeting, but obviously I would like members of the committee just to hold fire. Thank you. Councillor Murphy, I'm going to come to you first.